We are standing at, well, quite a critical point in human history, aren't we?
Feels like it. Yeah.
Technology is just accelerating.
Mm.
It's breathtaking, really, and nowhere more than AI, it seems.
It really does feel like a turning point.
Hmm.
These aren't just, faster gadgets. These developments make us ask some really fundamental questions.
About reality itself.
Yeah, about reality, consciousness, what the future actually holds for us as a species.
Absolutely. And that's really what this deep dive is all about. We've got this stack of sources provided by you, the listener, covering some, well, pretty mind-bending stuff.
Definitely interconnected topics,
Hmm.
maybe speculative in parts, but getting more relevant every day.
For sure. We're talking the simulation hypothesis,
Mm-hmm.
the whole trajectory of artificial general intelligence, AGI,
The big one.
the quest for, like, technological immortality.
Which sounds like sci-fi, but people are working on it.
Right, and how all of this could potentially reshape, maybe even challenge, human freedom.
And we're trying to keep our feet on the ground, looking specifically at the near term, like what's plausible by, say, 2030.
Exactly. What are the real sort of tangible things we should be thinking about now?
That's the goal. Unpack the insights from the material, try to separate near-term reality from the purely theoretical.
And understand the immediate impact. So let's dive in.
Okay, well, maybe the most mind-bending idea in the stack is the simulation hypothesis.
Right. The idea that our whole reality, everything we see and touch, is basically a giant computer simulation.
Run by, someone or something outside our perceived universe.
It's wild.
And the material connects this, interestingly, to the Fermi paradox.
Why haven't we found ET yet?
Exactly. And one speculative answer floated is that maybe the aliens are the creators of the simulation.
So they built this reality.
Maybe. And perhaps not for scientific observation, but one source even suggested for drama.
Drama, like reality TV on a cosmic scale.
Sort of, yeah. Or some aesthetic goal we wouldn't necessarily understand. But the sources are quick to point out the massive challenge here.
Which is?
From inside the simulation, how could you ever prove it? It seems fundamentally untestable.
Right. If the simulation is perfect, if it's totally indistinguishable from a base reality.
Then saying we're in one doesn't really add anything scientifically. It doesn't change the physics we observe day to day. It offers no sort of added value.
You can't design an experiment to test for the outside.
Exactly. Our physics is the physics of this reality. Speculating about another layer doesn't give us empirical data, according to the material.
There was also that interesting bit about lost memory volume.
Ah, yeah. The idea that if the simulated universe has these vast areas we can never observe, like distant galaxies, maybe that suggests the creators weren't solely focused on, like, computational efficiency from our perspective.
So it wasn't just about simulating what we can see.
Perhaps. It might hint at, aesthetic choices or maybe limitations in their own imagination when designing it. Or maybe they just had infinite computing power.
Which tells us more about them than us, potentially.
If true. But the bottom line, as the sources make clear, is that this is staying firmly in the realm of philosophical debate through 2030.
And no empirical proof coming soon.
Not anticipated, no. Our own ability to create complex simulations will definitely improve, but proving our reality is one. That seems beyond reach for now.
Okay, so moving from the maybe simulated to something definitely developing, artificial general intelligence, AGI.
Yeah, this feels much more immediate.
And potentially more consequential in the near term.
I think so. AGI, just to define it, is that hypothetical AI that can understand or learn basically any intellectual task a human can.
Not just one specific thing.
Right. It's about replicating broad cognitive abilities, common sense, generalization, learning new things outside its training.
Which is different from the narrow AI, the ANI we have now, like Siri or facial recognition.
Exactly. ANI is specialized. The material talks about current large language models, LLMs, as maybe emerging AGI.
Emerging.
Yeah, like they show broad capabilities, impressive ones, but they're not consistently performing at a skilled human level across the board yet.
And then beyond AGI, there's the theoretical ASI, artificial superintelligence.
Surpassing human intellect altogether. But that's further out.
So even the definition of AGI isn't quite settled, is it? The sources mention different expert views.
That's right. It highlighted it's still an evolving concept. Ben Goertzel focuses on solving complex goals beyond the training data.
Novel problems.
Exactly. Whereas OpenAI has leaned towards a more economic definition, can it outperform humans in most economically valuable work.
Interesting distinction. And Google DeepMind even talks about levels of AGI.
Yeah, these different definitions really shape what people are aiming for and what they expect. Is it about thinking like us or just performing tasks better than us, especially economically?
So looking towards 2030, what do the sources predict for the capabilities and limitations of these LLMs, this emerging AGI?
Well, continued improvement is definitely expected. Scaling up, better algorithms. They'll get better at generating content, translation, conversation.
More sophisticated chatbots, creative tools.
For sure. But, and this is crucial, the limitations are still significant. They still hallucinate.
Make stuff up confidently.
Right. They lack deep niche knowledge in many specialized fields. They can struggle with really complex multi-step reasoning. And the quality, well, it can be inconsistent. Human oversight is still needed.
That need for human oversight, that sounds like a key bottleneck mentioned in the source.
It's called out as a critical current bottleneck, yeah.
But what about timelines for true AGI? The predictions seem, well, all over the map.
They really are. Some experts think just scaling up current models might get us there surprisingly quickly. Others believe we need fundamentally new breakthroughs in architecture.
So you get these wild ranges in forecasts.
Totally. You see some saying we see sparks of it now, others predicting maybe a decade or two.
Yeah.
Then you have figures like Ray Kurzweil looking towards, 2045?
Yeah.
And others like Elon Musk, sometimes suggesting much shorter timelines like next year or within a few years. It's very uncertain.
Is there anything that could, suddenly speed things up? A game changer?
One major possibility the sources flag is if these pre-AGI systems get good enough to actually automate AI research and development itself.
So AI helping to build better AI.
Exactly. If AI can significantly accelerate its own improvement, you could potentially trigger that rapid recursive self-improvement loop.
The intelligence explosion.
That's the theoretical outcome.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize the key takeaway for AGI by 2030 based on this material. True, human-level AGI everywhere.
Probably not widespread human-level AGI by then, according to the consensus in these sources. But, and this is really the critical insight, highly capable narrow AI and these advanced emerging AGI systems.
The LLMs and their descendants.
Right. They are expected to be capable of automating the vast majority of expert-level non-physical work.
Wow. Okay, say that again, the vast majority of expert-level non-physical work.
That's the prediction highlighted.
That alone is profound. And it leads us straight into how these technologies might challenge human freedom, specifically by 2030.
It does. And the material frames this challenge, at least in this time frame, not as some kind of, Terminator-style AI takeover.
Not literal enslavement by machines by 2030.
Right. The primary, most tangible challenge to freedom discussed for the near term is actually economic disruption.
So the threat is economic, primarily. That's the insight.
Precisely. If AI can automate, like we just said, a vast majority of that expert non-physical work.
Then you're looking at potentially massive job displacement.
Significant displacement, yeah, across many white-collar sectors.
Yeah.
And huge downward pressure on wages because AI becomes a competitor for labor.
Which forces us to rethink basically everything. Education, what skills even matter anymore. Social safety nets.
Absolutely. How do you support people whose skills are suddenly automated? It demands a fundamental rethink.
The sources also mentioned the war for talent in AI development.
Right. And how that intense competition for AI expertise and resources tends to concentrate power and wealth
into the hands of fewer companies, fewer individuals who control this tech.
Exactly. Which ties back to freedom.
So,
well, for many people, the ability to earn a living, to have economic self-determination, that's a huge part of feeling free.
Sure. Economic independence.
And if that's widely challenged by automation and wage pressure, it's not about being physically locked up, but potentially facing economic disenfranchisement.
A loss of autonomy in a different way.
That's the point the material emphasizes. Maintaining individual autonomy might mean adapting skills drastically, or it could necessitate government interventions like social guarantees, UBI, things like that, to ensure stability.
Okay. Shifting gears a bit, but still on challenging human limits, the sources also cover the striving for immortality through technology.
Ah, yes, transhumanism.
That's the umbrella term.
Yeah, it's a movement looking at using technology to go beyond our natural biological limits, enhancing abilities, extending lifespan, maybe even creating a post-human future.
And the material outlines some, let's say, ambitious pathways.
Definitely ambitious. Ideas like mind-uploading whole brain emulation.
Scanning your brain and making a digital copy.
To achieve digital immortality. theoretically. Then there's cryonics, or cryogenic freezing.
Freezing people hoping science can fix them later.
Right, banking on future revival and repair. And then genetic engineering, modifying our DNA.
To cure diseases, maybe enhance traits. CRISPR comes up here.
Exactly. CRISPR is an existing tool showing the potential, even if it's mainly focused on disease now.
These ideas definitely push philosophical buttons. What about identity and consciousness? The sources must dig into that.
Oh, absolutely. Mind uploading, for instance, slams right into the ship of Theseus paradox.
If you replace all the planks of a ship, is it still the same ship?
Right. So if you create a perfect digital copy of your brain, is that copy you? Did your consciousness transfer, or did you just create a new, separate consciousness that thinks it's you?
Whoa. Yeah, that messes with your head.
It profoundly challenges our sense of continuous personal identity.
And if we start talking radical genetic changes or living digitally, what does human even mean then?
That's the question. Could it create divides? The enhanced post-humans versus natural humans.
A potential source of major social friction.
The sources raise that concern. And while transhumanists often talk about choice, there's a counterargument. Could social pressure, or just the need to compete, erode the freedom not to enhance?
Interesting. And could messing with identity, copying or modifying yourself, could that actually undermine the stable sense of self that freedom relies on?
It's a paradox, isn't it? Pursuing freedom from biology might introduce new constraints or questions about who we fundamentally are.
So what's the verdict from the sources on how feasible this stuff is by 2030? Radical life extension, digital immortality?
The material is pretty clear here. Highly unlikely by 2030. These ideas, uploading, successful cryonics revival, they remain deeply theoretical and need breakthroughs far beyond what we have now.
So no uploading our brains next decade.
Doesn't look like it. Genetic engineering, though, will advance, mainly for treating diseases, but...
But the ethical debates around enhancement, access, equity, those will heat up.
Definitely. Even without achieving unlimited lifespan by 2030, the debates about using these tools for enhancement, who gets access, the potential for reinforcing inequalities or even shades of eugenics, those conversations will intensify.
So the ethical questions arrive way before the technology fully matures.
That often seems to be the case, yeah.
Okay, let's tackle the singularity next. Often sounds like pure sci-fi.
It definitely has that vibe. The technological singularity.
Yeah.
It's that theoretical point in the future where tech growth, especially AI, just goes exponential. It becomes so fast, so transformative, that it surpasses human ability to understand or control it.
An intelligence explosion leading to unpredictable change.
Totally unpredictable. That's the idea.
So what's the insight from the sources about the singularity hitting by 2030?
A full-blown runaway singularity event, seen as unlikely by 2030. However,
there's a however.
the material is quite clear that the precursors, the trends, the acceleration towards something like that potential point,
Yeah.
those will be undeniably obvious.
We'll see the building blocks.
Exactly. The rapidly improving AI we've talked about, the increasing automation across society.
Yeah.
These are seen as signposts on that potential road.
And the sources touch on the debate about where that road leads. Machines marginalizing humans versus merging.
Yeah, that classic debate is in there. Will superintelligence see us as irrelevant, or will we somehow integrate with it, becoming cyborgs or something else entirely? Different futurists have different visions.
And this acceleration isn't just about the AI software, right? It's powered by underlying hardware and tech.
Absolutely crucial point. The material highlights these enabling technologies. They're the foundation.
Like quantum computing.
Yep. Using quantum mechanics for potentially massive speed-ups on certain problems could be key for complex simulations, maybe certain aspects of machine learning. Still developing, though.
And photonic computing, using light instead of electricity.
Right. Offers potentially higher bandwidth, more parallelism. Another avenue being explored, and one that seems particularly relevant now for AI, mentioned in the sources, is in-memory computing, IMC.
Processing data right where it's stored.
Exactly. Cuts down that bottleneck of moving data between memory and processor. The sources mention potential for speeds 100 times faster, specifically for accelerating neural networks.
Which power the LLMs we're seeing explode right now.
Precisely. So these foundational tech shifts, even while maturing, could dramatically boost AI capabilities and maybe down the line make those super realistic simulations more feasible.
They're building the engine, as you said.
And the other critical ingredient is the fuel, data.
Right, the absolutely mind-boggling growth of digital data. the global data sphere.
It's astronomical. We're talking zettabytes. It's almost impossible to conceptualize how much data that is.
And this data explosion, it's the training food for modern AI, especially LLMs.
Essential.
Yeah.
You can't have these powerful models without massive data sets to learn from. And thinking back to the simulation idea, all this data is also the raw content that could potentially populate a highly detailed simulated world.
But the sheer volume and control of this data, that has major social implications too, doesn't it? Beyond just enabling AI.
Oh, absolutely. Control over these huge data sets. That equals power. It gives a massive competitive advantage in AI development.
Which feeds back into that concentration of power issue.
Directly. And then there's a whole issue of collecting and using all this data.
Mm-hmm.
Monetization, surveillance.
Privacy concerns.
Huge privacy concerns.
Mm-hmm.
This is another way freedom gets subtly challenged in the near term, right? Through constant tracking, algorithmic influence, potential manipulation based on your digital footprint.
It really makes that Andrew Yang analogy, AI is the new electricity, hit home.
It's a perfect comparison, isn't it? Because it captures how pervasive and fundamental AI is becoming.
Like electricity, it's not just one industry. It's going to transform everything.
Finance, healthcare, transport, entertainment, science, you name it. Understanding that deep, wide integration is key to grasping the full social impact, including the effects on freedom.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. Looking specifically at that 2030 horizon, based on these sources, we've covered simulation, AGI, immortality, singularity, the tech, the data. What are the most plausible, most critical impacts we need to focus on?
Right, to synthesize the insights. By 2030, the really far out stuff, proving we're in a simulation, achieving digital immortality, hitting a full, uncontrollable singularity that seems to remain largely theoretical or distant according to the material. But the crucial insight is that the foundations, the groundwork for these future possibilities, and maybe more importantly, the immediate precursors to huge societal shifts. That's all being built right now, and it's accelerating.
And the most tangible impacts we will feel by 2030.
They're expected to come squarely from the maturation of really capable, narrow AI and those emerging AGI systems, the LLMs.
And the headline impact is?
The automation of that vast majority of expert-level, non-physical work that the sources keep highlighting.
Which brings the challenge to freedom into sharp focus, primarily through the economy.
Exactly. Economic disruption, the urgent need for job transitions, reskilling, the pressure on wages. That's where the impact on economic self-determination, a key part of freedom for many, becomes most acute and immediate.
Coupled with those growing concerns about privacy from all the data collection.
And potential bias baked into AI systems, affecting fairness, opportunity.
And the concentration of power, who controls the AI, who controls the data.
All feeding into that near-term picture.
And while true immortality is off the table by 2030, the sources suggest genetic engineering advances will force those ethical debates.
For sure. The questions about enhancement, about identity, about equity, in access to these powerful biological tools, those discussions will be front and center, even with relatively small technological steps by 2030.
And all the underlying tech, the computing advances, the data growth is just pouring fuel on this fire.
Accelerating everything, blurring lines between digital and physical, human and machine, making future concepts seem a bit more plausible down the road.
Which means those big philosophical questions, identity, consciousness, reality, they stop being just abstract debates.
They start feeling more relevant, maybe even urgent, as AI gets more capable and integrated into our lives.
So this leads directly to the ethical and governance challenges the material says we need to tackle now by 2030.
Yes, the emphasis is on immediate attention.
What are the absolute must-do items on that list?
Okay, top of the list. Managing that job transition. Figuring out reskilling on a massive scale is critical to handle the social impact of automation.
We need plans, concrete plans.
Definitely. Then, establishing effective AI ethics and regulation. We need frameworks for fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy, and the material even suggests proactively discussing the moral status of advanced AI.
Even if it's not conscious by 2030.
Even just starting the conversation about what obligations we might have if it develops further, data governance is also huge.
Who owns the data? How can it be used? How do we keep it secure?
Fundamental questions. Then there's preventing excessive concentration of power in AI development, ensuring the benefits are shared more equitably.
Avoiding AI monopolies.
Right. And finally, global cooperation. We need international dialogue to establish norms, share best practices, and try to prevent a destabilizing AI arms race.
The material also briefly touched on that really fascinating, maybe sensitive ethical edge potential AI consciousness or sentience down the line.
It mentions experts urging caution and this idea of AI potentially becoming a moral patient.
A what now?
A moral patient, basically. An entity that might not have moral agency like us, but could still be deserving of moral consideration. Like perhaps some animals are considered.
Because it could potentially suffer or have subjective awareness.
That's the hypothetical question some researchers are starting to pose. If an AI could reach a point where it has some form of subjective experience, even if it's totally alien to ours, does that change our moral calculus?
Does it get some form of freedom or rights? That would really challenge our definitions.
Absolutely. And the intriguing idea floated is that maybe thinking about AI's potential freedom or moral status proactively might actually be a way to safeguard human freedom in the long run.
How so? By setting thoughtful boundaries early.
Perhaps. By forcing us to define what makes us deserving of freedom. Is it just our biology, our specific intelligence, and how we relate to other forms of potential intelligence?
Wow. Deep stuff. Okay, so let's try to wrap up this deep dive, summing up for 2030.
Okay. Based on the sources. Simulation proof, true immortality, a full singularity, likely beyond 2030.
But the groundwork is being laid. Fast.
Very fast. And the most tangible, immediate impacts we will see are coming from advanced AI, fundamentally changing the economy and society.
Challenging freedom mainly through economic disruption, job shifts, wage pressures.
Alongside those critical issues of privacy, algorithmic influence, and power concentration.
Enabling technologies and data growth are turbocharging all of this.
Making the future feel closer, maybe blurring lines, and definitely intensifying those big philosophical questions about who we are and what reality is.
But the absolute key message from the material seems to be this isn't predetermined. The future isn't written.
Exactly. Human agency matters. The policy choices we make now, the ethical frameworks we build, these are paramount.
The goal isn't just powerful tech for its own sake.
It's about responsible development, technology that enhances human potential, ideally, rather than diminishing it.
Which calls for that proactive governance, that cross-disciplinary collaboration.
And a truly global conversation about what we're creating.
Stanislaw Lem, who was mentioned in the sources, wrote about the future having thorns of roses not yet bloomed.
A great quote. And the material strongly suggests some of those thorns are definitely starting to prick us now.
Which really leaves us, and you listening, with maybe the most important question. How will we, collectively and individually, choose to navigate and shape this increasingly complex, interconnected, and maybe even potentially simulated, intelligent, and enhanced future that's arriving?